Tonight, Sabres are on the road. They are playing a team that is past them in the standings, and I would say is past them in their trajectories going forward. The Ottawa Senators. Plus, I want to get to a little bit on Ryan McLeod, who is really struggling offensively, but is still playing well defensively. Kind of a curious case of him. All ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, and thanks for making the Locked On Sabres podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That includes watching us on our YouTube channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase coming to you on a Thursday game day. The Sabres are on the road in Ottawa. Got a lot to say on the Senators, comparing them to the Sabres and how Ottawa has passed them in the standings. And I would say going forward, they look like the better team on paper. And the Sabres have some catching up to do for the long term, even with the Ottawa Senators. So we'll get to that coming up on today's show. We also got a little bit on Ryan McLeod coming your way, who is going to be back in the top six. And he is on a goalless drought. A lot to get to on him specifically in tonight's matchup coming your way here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We have talked a lot about Elias Pettersson in recent days. If you've got a take on the Pettersson sweepstakes, the Sabres role in it, and you want to hit us up, you want to get it right on the show, you can check us out on Twitter at Locked On Sabres. You can hit me up on Blue Sky. I'm at Sneaky Joe there. And of course, our Locked On Sabres text club. If you are not already a subscriber, you can sign up by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sabres. The text that I did want to read from one listener a little bit later on. One listener wrote a nice, follow-up on the idea that the Sabres would not trade for Elias Pettersson because of the $10 million bonus that he is due this summer, and then all the other $5 million bonuses that will be due to him later on in the contract. And one texter wrote in, $10 million is a lot, but bonuses are bonuses. You can't do that for one team, then turn around and say your hockey team is embarrassing and say, oh, well, if the thing stopping the deal from getting done is a bonus, while we just watched last weekend, the Bills primarily played their game to give players bonuses, then he needs to sell the team. And that was an interesting, comparison between the two teams, because I think it is fair to question the Sabres' desire to trade for Elias Pettersson based on the financial commitment. And you're right. Last Sunday, they're playing Von Miller to get a $1.5 million roster bonus, versus sack bonus. They're playing Sam Martin to get an extra $100,000 on a punt bonus. Mac Hollins, an extra, was it $250,000 for a receptions bonus? Like, they were working to get their players more money. The Bills, and I know it's the NFL and it's a winning NFL organization, they print the money over there, and that does matter, but it is very frustrating to fans when you have the same owner for both teams, and one is run like they have an unlimited, they have no bounds, they'll spend whatever it takes, and then the other organization is run like a mom and pop shop, and that is going to be frustrating to fans. But hey, they just sold part of the Bills for a lot of money. Maybe they'll start investing some of it, throwing it into the hockey team, one can hope, but they deserve every bit of criticism that they get for that, and every question that they do, because they're a team that doesn't spend the cap. They're a team that took a long time to put any money into the building at all. They just finally started doing that last off season. There's still more work to go there. The concourse is the seats. And the way contracts are constructed, like the staffing, right, in the personnel department when it comes to scouts and people that work in the front office, coaching staff stuff, like there's a lot of evidence that backs up that they do not want to put the money in put in what it takes to make the Sabres into a winning organization, at least not by doing it that way. So they deserve it. All right, let's get to the comparison between the Buffalo Sabres and the Ottawa Senators. This has been an interesting one for a couple of years, and I would include the Red Wings in this as well. Those three teams who have been a little bit ahead of Montreal for most of these last 5 years have all been fighting with each other to be the team to jump up into the top four. The Atlantic Division has had a hard line in the sand over the last 5 years where it's the top four and the bottom four, and there's never any wiggle room. It is going to be Leafs, Panthers, Bruins, Lightning at the top. Year to year to year, that has been true. And Florida, I guess at the beginning of this stretch that we're talking about, wasn't quite on the level of those top four, but they certainly have been for 3 years and have made 2 finals appearances, won a Stanley Cup. They're right back this year as one of the best teams in hockey. And meanwhile, these 4 teams below, none of which have made the playoffs recently, right? Montreal hasn't made it other than that COVID year where they kind of had a weird format to get in. The Red Wings haven't made it in a bunch of years. I think their number is 6 or 7. And Ottawa's number is 6 or 7, I think, also, since they've been in the playoffs. And, of course, the Sabres are 14. So all these these teams at the bottom of the division have been working to jump up and join the top 4, and none have come really that close. This year, maybe you could say the Sabres came close, right? The Sabres came close 2 years ago once. The Red Wings came close last year. Ottawa is coming close this year, but it's the same thing as the Sabres 2 years ago and the Red Wings last year, where they're just not there yet. But I think they're showing signs that they could be by the end of this season. Ottawa on the year, 41 points in 39 games. It's a 19-17-3 record. So by NHL math, it's above 500. By real math, it's below 500. The Senators are, by points percentage, that second playoff team, second wildcard team right now at a 526. They are 1 point back of Columbus, but they have played 2 fewer games than the Blue Jackets have. So, but by their pace, Ottawa is actually the second team that would make the wildcard round, even though they're below 90. Like, they're part of this season that's been weird in the East where there could be a team that makes it with like 85, 86 points. And the Senators are right now the team that is leading that pace. So they've looked pretty good, but they have not been great. What is true, though, is they have passed the Sabres. On the organizational trajectories, I think it was fair to say for a couple of years there, the Sabres were ahead of the rest of those bottom feeders. They were ahead of Ottawa, they were ahead of Detroit, and they were ahead of Montreal. And since then, Ottawa's really grown. And I think there's 2 key differences between these 2 teams that have allowed the Senators to jump the Sabres and make them a more likely playoff team and a team that I would bet on for over the next 3 years to year be a better hockey team than the Buffalo Sabres are. And the 2 reasons are, 1, their young guys have developed into more consistent players than the Sabres guys have. And for the Sabres, of course, we know who that list is. That's Dylan Cousins. That's Jack Quinn. That's JJ Peterka. That's, if you want to throw Owen Power into that, I would hesitate to do it. Like, some of these guys are, like Power and Peterka are contributors, but they are not quite core pieces, pushing for all-star nominees. Like, they have not taken big leaps. They've taken jumps or even small steps, but not quite the big leap. And in Ottawa, I think you've had that with a couple of guys. Tim Stützle has now for a couple of seasons been that player where through 2 years it was like, all right, nothing crazy good here, pretty good, top 6 guy. And then bam, he exploded 2 years ago. And he has followed that up with 2 great years in a row. This year, he's above a point per game, leading the way for the Senators as a number 1 center in the NHL. Maybe you want to say that's the equivalent of Thompson, but Stützle is a lot younger, 23 years old. He's the age Cousins is. And Stützle was drafted higher than Dylan Cousins by a couple of selections. He was a 3rd overall pick. Cousins was 7th. But that's one difference. Their young center, took a giant step forward, and the Sabres' young center has been kind of regressing for almost 24 months now. They also got better offensive output from Brady Tkachuk. Now, Tkachuk's always been, again, like a very good player, and it was 2 years ago. Like, okay, he's going to decide to be above a point-a-game player, and this year he's right on track to do that again. Drake Batherson is another one. Again, a lot of these guys kind of took steps forward in the last couple of years, but all of those guys have maintained where they're at. All of those Ottawa Senators took steps about 2 years ago, and they've maintained what they are. The Sabre players around the same age group took steps 2 years ago, and then almost all of them have regressed since then. Ottawa has not seen the same level of regression. Jake Sanderson, by the way, I really like him too. The other key difference that Ottawa has accomplished that I think has them, maybe this is the bigger reason why they're ahead of the Sabres right now, is they made the effort to supplement their young talent, their young studs, with good veteran players. And that was Claude Giroux a couple of years ago, who is still producing for them fairly well. He's not the star player he once was, but he's fourth on the team in scoring. He's playing in the top six, so Giroux's giving them a level of stability. It did not really work with Jake Chychrun. They tried on that one on the blue line. Didn't really go the way that they had hoped for. The other big one is in net. They added Linus Ullmark in the offseason. They made the big trade. First round pick. We need a goaltender. Let's go be aggressive. Let's go get him. And they did that. And he's been very good for them this season. He is currently dealing with an injury, and you see how different they are with and without Linus Ullmark this season. They have a 12-7-2 record with Ullmark on the ice, and they are 7-10-1 without him on the ice. So much better. He has a .915 save percentage, and the rest, all the other goaltenders that have played for them, there have been three others, are all below 900 on the season. So those couple, even though it's not a lot, like the Red Wings kind of built their whole roster on veterans. The Senators supplemented their roster with veterans, and the Sabres have done almost nothing with veterans. So that's another area where I do think they're ahead of the Sabres, and it is all coming together. It's all meshing together in the way I think you would have hoped it happened here, but it's not quite the same. And again, grain of salt here, or not even grain of salt. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm giving them too much love, and maybe maybe even the last couple minutes I have sounded like I'm giving them too much love, because I did pick them to make the playoffs, and they've been reasonably good, but they are still on pace for like 85 points. Like, I don't want to go too far. They are not amazing. They are not a tremendous team. They're pretty good. On the year, you look at some of their splits, expected 5-on-5, expected goals for percentage. They rank 18th in the NHL. Corsi for percentage, they rank 10th in the NHL, which is pretty good. Save percentage, again, they're kind of lower on the year because Ullmark hasn't been able to play as many games as they probably would have hoped. How about the rate of scoring chances on the season? Where do they rank? 14th. Like, again, they're in the teens in most of these categories. They're a pretty good team. They maybe deserve a couple more wins than they've had. They're not a stellar organization. They are not, they're not chasing down the Leafs or the Panthers at this moment, but they are definitely closer to doing that than the Buffalo Sabres are. And that, I think that's been debatable for a couple of seasons. Right now, I don't really think it's debatable. Ottawa's closer. Ottawa is closer than the Sabres, and Kevin Adams has work to do to make that ground back up and be the team that's ready to jump in. Quick Bills comparison, and then we'll get to the matchup tonight. All these AFC East teams, for years and years and years in football, we're just waiting for the New England Patriots and Tom Brady to be done winning. And it was kind of jockeying for, okay, clearly none of us are ever, the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets, none of us are ever going to challenge Tom Brady. But when he's done, who's going to be ready to step in to that vacancy on top of the throne? And the Bills were the team that was ready to step in when Brady left, and they've never given it up since. And in the Atlantic, there are 4 teams at the top, so it's a little different, but Boston's old. Tampa is old. And Boston started the season very poorly, and I still think they are kind of fake good this year. I think they're getting away with it, and they're not getting that criticism levied against them because they have so much history that points to, oh, well, they're always going to be good. This year is different. I think Boston is different than they've been in past years. But right now, standings-wise, they're up there. So maybe that's going to happen soon, but it hasn't happened yet. And Tampa, kind of the same thing. Like, they're still amazing. Kucherov is so good, and Hedman and Vasilevsky, like their top players are their top players are too good to fall down yet. But maybe eventually that happens to Tampa, and I think it's definitely going to happen to Boston. And when it does, who's ready to fill that vacancy? And right now, my bet would be the Ottawa Senators until the Sabres change my mind. When we come back, let's get to the matchup specifically tonight and what I'm looking to bet on for tonight's game, and more specifically, Ryan McLeod. That's who I'm locked in on for tonight's game. He is going to be playing an important role, and he has given the Sabres two things this year, one very good thing and one very bad thing, and we'll explain when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Gametime. You got playoff football in town this weekend, and there's some good deals. If you want to check out the game, I mean, it's not going to be too frigid. We've had colder. It's going to be like 28, 30 degrees. That's fine. Buffalo, we do that all the time. Although I will say I'm doing the show in my basement right now, and it's freezing today. But Sunday, it'll be a little bit warmer, just a little bit. And if you want to go to the game, you want to check out the tickets available, you should check out the Gametime app. Hockey games, of course, too, when they return. Love going to live events in the winter. Sports, music, theater, comedy. Got to check it out. Gametime has made it easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff, shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. You can look through the app and you can see the angles you'll be looking at. If you're going to be high up and looking down on the field or ice, or if you want to be close to the glass or the field, you can look through and it'll show you exactly what your vantage point is going to be before you decide to buy. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres and the Senators. The Sabres will be wearing blue, I believe, tonight. Ottawa's wearing white at home. I don't know if that is because Ottawa chose to, or maybe they like the color mashup. I don't really know what that is. Ottawa, by the way, kind of weird. They are coming off a 9-game road trip. The Senators have not played a home game since December 14th. I don't know what that is. They played, listen to how long they've been away and how far away they've been. West Coast trip: Seattle, Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas, St. Louis, Detroit. I mean, they started in Seattle, and I guess they went up, and then they kind of slowly worked their way back. But, man, they've been all over the country. So, Ottawa finally returning home. And, like, you've been wearing white the whole time. You're just going to wear white when you come back home. It's just a little strange. So, the Sabres get an opportunity to play in Ottawa for the first time that anybody has in about a month. So, maybe there's an arena thing happening. Oh, World Juniors. I'm sorry. Duh. Total dummy here. The World Juniors were going on in the last month in Ottawa. That's why the Senators have been on the road. Okay. Forget I said all that. I mean, they have been on the road a long time. That didn't change. So for tonight's game, the guy that I am locked in on with all these injuries, Thompson dealing with something that's forcing him to play on the wing. Kulik out week to week. Cousins got to get bumped up to the first line. The guy, Lafferty, he's been pretty bad, and he's been dealing with stuff, right, an illness, whatever. Malenstein, too, although Malenstein's a winger. Ryan McLeod, because of all those injuries and circumstances, he's got to be the number 2 center. And McLeod, with that being said, second game in a row, he's going to be the number 2 center, played over 20 minutes last game. He is who I'm locked in on for tonight's game, because his season has been somewhat predictable, but I would say mildly disappointing, because What we know about Ryan McLeod is he is a very good defensive center. He is a very good defensive center. On the year, by goals above replacement, he is the best Sabre defensive forward. There are other numbers, though, to point to. Benson is the best. EVO is one of those. If you really get deep in the weeds, you'd be getting into a real analytical debate between Benson and McLeod. I might say McLeod is a little better because he's so fast. His back checking is crazy good. His forechecking is amazing. He's a little bit stronger than Benson. Like, Benson is a great defensive player on his positioning and where he is, and he always makes the right call, and he kind of tricks the other team into turning the puck over to him. He's almost like he's controlling you with his mind. Benson is. McLeod's just like hair on fire, wild all around the ice, moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You can't breathe because he's just all over you because he's such a good skater. So both great defensive players, very different types of defensive players, though. So McLeod's giving you that 93rd percentile goals above replacement defensively on the season for forwards in the whole league, 93rd percentile. He is giving them nothing on offense. Absolutely nothing. And that is one place where I would have hoped that McLeod could have grown in Buffalo compared to Edmonton. He's always been a very good defensive center, and that's why the Sabres traded for him. But I think the Sabres would have hoped, and I would have hoped, that in an expanded role with more ice time in Buffalo, he could go from a guy that scored 12 goals in Edmonton to somebody that could score 18, 19. Maybe he has it off once in a while, 20-goal season. He's so fast. He stick handles very quickly. Like, he kind of feels like a player that should be better offensively, but he just isn't. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, maybe he just doesn't get it. He is not a great finisher. All that added in, he has a 23 goalless streak going. He has not scored a goal since before the Buffalo Bills bye week. The Bills are in the playoffs. Their record was 8-2 the last time Ryan McLeod scored a goal. On November 16th, before Thanksgiving, the Sabres were in a playoff spot, I think, the last time Ryan McLeod scored a goal. It's been 23 games, and he has played in the fourth line, a lot of that. Part of that's his own doing, right, because his play had dropped off. But he's had some opportunities to play on a little bit more of an offensive line with a couple of guys. He's played with Quinn. I know Quinn's having a bad year. Benson. He's played with guys that are Zucker. He played a good amount with even still until like a week or two ago. So not enough excuses. Like, he should be helping the Sabres offensively a little bit. Chip one in once in a while. You don't have to be a 25-30 goal scorer, but be the secondary scoring that this team badly needs. And he's given them nothing. A big old goose egg in the last 23 games. In that stretch, he also has 6 assists. Not great either. And a 46.4% expected goals for percentage. That's not as bad as you might think. It's about middle of the pack on the Sabres, comparing him to his teammates who have, a lot of them been bad in the last month and a half. So McLeod, you need more from. And with the circumstances being what they are and him having to leap into the top 6, they need more offense from him. He has got to score more. He has got to help set up a little bit more. I don't need him to be something he's not. He is not ever going to be an amazing offensive player, but he can't be a zero. He can't be a zero. That has to be true. So McLeod tonight, he is going to be given another great opportunity. I mean, he is going to be playing with JJ Peterka tonight and Alex Tuck. You got to score. You got to be able to score with those two guys as your line mates. You're never going to get better line mates than that on this hockey team. It's not going. It's the best you could do, right? I mean, Thompson, I guess, if he were playing on the wing, would be better, but Thompson's typically not at wing. Like, Tuck and Peterka is the best you get. So if he still doesn't score, if he plays for like a week with those guys and there's nothing happening offensively, then I'm going to be supremely disappointed in Ryan McLeod. When we come back, a little bit more on this matchup and my sneaky good parlay for tonight's action. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by FanDuel. When we get to my sneaky parlay of the day, all those odds are going to be courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can go check out what I like. And if you're just interested in who they think is the most likely to score in tonight's game. And of course, not just hockey. I mean, what a weekend of football we've got ahead. And it starts tonight. College football playoff, Notre Dame and Penn State. So you got some big games coming up. Notre Dame, by the way, I saw a report that a lot of the players are dealing with the flu. So you can see how that moves the line if you're interested. So you can check it all out at FanDuel Sportsbook. All the odds, big upsets, game-winning drives. The NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. I was not lying earlier, by the way. It is like 15 degrees out, and my studio here at home is in the basement. And I got a space heater over here on the side. Put it a little farther away so you can't hear it. It's freezing. Heating vent. I got one of those little plastic things that directs the vent towards where you're sitting. Man, I got a blanket down here. Stay warm if you're in Buffalo. Again, though, it's supposed to get a little bit warmer this weekend, so that's the good news. All right, enough of that. Sabres and Senators tonight. The Senators, I like them a lot. I like their roster a lot. Here's what their lineup looks like for tonight's game. No Linus Ullmark. Big bonus for the Sabres. Ullmark has been very good this year. He's dealing with an injury, though. He is week to week. He's not been skating. So it's going to be Anton Forsberg tonight, who has an .888 save percentage on the season. The roster for the Senators: Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson, and Claude Giroux up top. Shane Pinto, Ridley Gregg, and Brady Tkachuk on the second line. That is a very good top six. And then when you have Josh Norris and Nick Cousins on your third line, I like your depth as well. So Ottawa, deeper, and I would say right now more top-heavy than the Buffalo Sabres are. Defensively, they are not as talented. Jake Sanderson is super talented, like Thomas Chabot. Past that, Nick Jensen, he's not supposed to wow you. Defensive guy. Artem Zub, too. I just not super impressed. They're pretty good. I don't mind them. They don't get you beat. I'd rather have those guys out there in the ice than Matthias Samuelsson right now. I would still give the Sabres the advantage on the blue line, but forward-wise, it's going to be Ottawa. So tonight's game, with all that being said, Ottawa is favored. No surprise, -162 on the money line. The Sabres are +134. The over-under is down at 5.5 for tonight's game. Over is -132, and the under is +108. And that leads us into my sneaky parlay for tonight's game between the Ottawa Senators and the Buffalo Sabres. I have been going after emotional hedges as of late, and I am going to continue that trend. I am not going to take the puck line, though, for tonight's game. I am going to take Ottawa on the money line. -152. I like Ottawa in this game. Despite, I think the Sabres have the goaltending advantage, but I think Ottawa's going to find a way to score on Luukkonen. Luukkonen's been rocky. That's the word I've been using for Luukkonen lately. Over 5.5 goals. You give me the over on 5.5 in today's NHL, scoring up still. There were some trends in the league that they came out with a couple days ago that scoring is just as high as it's been the last couple of years, as high as it's been since after the lockout. So over 5.5 at -130. I am in on that. And then I am going to bet Dylan Cousins to record a point in tonight's game at +138. I think his odds are too low. It almost feels like they don't know or realize he's on the top line. He is centering Tage Thompson. That's all I need. Thompson is -154 to record a point. And what are the odds that whatever goal Thompson's in on, that Cousins will also be in on? Pretty good. So Cousins, between Thompson and Zucker, the two guys that are scoring the most on the wing this right now for the Sabres, plus 138. I mean, that's almost the same odds as Jack Quinn at plus 144. And Quinn is buried in the depth chart right now. So I really like Cousins to record a point in this one. So Senators money line, Cousins get a point, and over 5.5 goals is plus 524 for tonight's action between the Sabres and the Senators. Anyways, that'll do it for us today here on the this edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Be sure to check out Joe Marino on Locked On Bills. And you could check out Steal and Flip, Locked On Fantasy Hockey for your daily fantasy tips throughout the week. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.